Greetings. So I just wanted to talk for a couple minutes about how to set up your research environment to be productive in our research group. So we have specific ways of doing things, and the reason for that is because we're all more productive when we're all using similar tools. This doesn't mean that we don't periodically evaluate the tools that we use and make changes, but it does mean that at least to get started, we'd like everybody to be using a similar environment. So let's go through that. So our basic setup that you need to kind of get used to is if our research we do everything in Linux. And so typically, the easiest way for students um, to work within the Linux operating system is to install basically a virtual machine on their laptop. So we recommend installing VirtualBox. And then within VirtualBox, you can install Ubuntu 20.04 um, as the Linux distribution. That's the Linux distribution that we use. It's installed on most of the computers in the lab, and that's the one we have familiarity with. And we've chosen that one because it's reasonably up to date in terms of the compilers that ship with it. In addition to Ubuntu, within Ubuntu, we install Conda, and that's used for managing some software, especially the MoSDeF project. The lab communicates primarily on Slack. Slack is the fastest way to ask a question and get an answer in this lab. So we expect everybody to be on Slack and to be monitoring it. We manage our literature and references through a piece of software called Mendeley. Mendeley has a web interface and a Google Chrome plugin that you should install, and that will allow you to directly import papers from from the websites that they're hosted on, and it allows us to create groups and share papers based on project. And then in terms of preparing papers, preparing manuscripts, we use something called Overleaf. So Overleaf is in essence is a online version of LaTeX, and and so this is how we collaborate on papers. So it works very well because everybody can work on their part at the same time. Okay, so these are the tools. These are the things that we want everybody working with. In terms of getting set up, first step is to install the operating system. So you first have to install VirtualBox and then Linux within the virtual machine. There's a really good YouTube video here about how to do that. It's about 20 minutes long. So in about 20 to 25 minutes, you can be up and running. It's helpful to set up a shared folder between Windows and Linux so you can move files back and forth between the two operating systems. If you don't do this, you will not be able to move files between your Windows and Linux operating system unless you email them to yourself. And then within Linux, you want to install Conda. And my preference is to install Mini Conda because it's smaller and it serves our purposes. So we don't need all the other stuff. In terms of setting up Linux as it ships is missing a lot of things, but these are easily installed by using the apt command. So we would do apt install and then the name of the package we're looking for. And you see that most of these things are either text editors that we're looking at or compilers. Grace happens to be a two-dimensional plotting program that that actually is pretty handy. And so anyway, so once you get Ubuntu installed, then you'll do apt install to get these other pieces of software. In terms of setting up the Conda environment within Linux, once you get Conda or Mini Conda installed, then we need to install MoSDeF and Signac. So it's helpful to create a channel. So what do we get out of creating channels? So channels allow us to kind of compartmentalize our projects, and so the software then doesn't conflict with other pieces of software which may have different requirements. So we start by doing Conda create. So we make the channel, then we activate the environment, and then we install things into the environment. So these are just Conda install. And these are all the things that you need. And so that should be enough to get you going. Finally, just want to mention about Mendeley and Overleaf. So Mendeley is how we share papers. So I expect everybody to create an account on Mendeley. And there's also a Windows application for Mendeley, which is actually very handy. So we want you to use that. And then on Overleaf, create a free account. I actually have a paid account, and I use it to host all of our papers and collaborate. You do not need a paid account. You just need a free account. So just create an account, and this is how we're going to work on papers together. And if you don't know anything about LaTeX, don't worry about it because there's a great tutorial here, and you can kind of figure it out as you go. Okay, so that's Mendeley and Overleaf. And then the other thing is we do a lot of calculations on the Wayne State Grid computing environment. And so the first thing that you should do is create an account on the grid computing environment and then review the tutorials on how to use the grid. The biggest one is, being able to write a job submission script and run on appropriate hardware. And that's pretty much what I have. I just have a couple miscellaneous tips. Sometimes you may have, when you install the virtual machine, maybe you didn't specify enough disk space and you have to expand it. So here are a couple routes to expanding the disk space available to your virtual machine. And so with that, I think that's enough to get you started. But that's how we set up uh, things in our research group. Those are the tools we use, and I hope this was helpful.